Finnegan.
Alright, good evening,
As
Earth.
you
This
all
is Adam
probably
Sturch
know,
broadcasting
there
from the
is
Mushroom
an
Mansion,
Irish
Tallahassee, New
drinking
Mexico,
ballad
working on
very
oil
typically
painting,
called the Ballad of
angels,
Tim
and
Finnegan, or the
umbrellas.
Ballad of Finnegan's
Alright,
Wake.
I did a little
And
bit of
it tells the
fine-tuning to the
story
zinnia,
of Tim Finnegan,
mostly
who was
just
a hod
giving
carrier,
these
a
reddish,
bricklayer's
pinkish
assistant,
blossoms a slight
and
yellow
he was
cast
given
as they're
to,
transforming into the larger
hitting
petals.
the poteen rather
Leaves,
hard,
petals, you know, those
and he
things.
fell for
And
his
so
ladder.
now
It's
I've
the
laid in a
Humpty
string
Dumpty story. He
for a
fell
nice
from his
level
ladder,
line,
and
and there will
broke
be a
his back,
cumulus nimbus,
and his
sort of,
friends
or
waked
a little
him
bit
in the
congestus-like
grand
as well,
Irish fashion. And at the height of the
floating
wake,
directly
they
above
became
the zinnia.
so carried
And
away
for
and
that, I wanted
intoxicated
a
that
nice
they
flat bottom.
upended a bucket of Guinness
So
over his
I
head,
measured
and
down,
he
put a string
revived
across it, and now we will
joined
try
the
and
dance.
float the cloud right down onto the string. So here we go. I just mixed up a little Payne's Gray and zinc titanium white. Very bright white. Alright, so we'll see how this goes from here. Here we go.
Tim got rather full, his head felt heavy, which made him shake. Fell from a ladder and he broke his skull, and he carried him home as corpse to wake. Rolled him up in a nice clean sheet, and laid him out upon the bed. They gave him a whiskey at his feet, and a bottle of porter at his head. Whack for the down, that's the partner with the lawyer, Trummer's shake. Wasn't it the truth I told you? Lots of fun at Finnegan's Wake. His friends assembled at the wake, and Mrs. Finnegan called for lunch, where she brought in tea and cake and white stick and whiskey punch. The overall began to price the ice cream cups you will see. The morning way to get out your guts and penny Mickey. Back for the down, and stand on there with the floor, your Trummer's shake. Wasn't it the truth I told you? Lots of fun at Finnegan's Wake. That Maggie O'Connor took up the job of BCC, a wronging sure. They gave her a belt and an apple, left her sprawling on the floor. And the war did soon engage, woman to woman and man to man. General law was all the rage, and her own eruption soon began to whack for the man out and stay back there with the lawyer Trummer's shake. Wasn't it the truth I told you? Lots of fun at Finnegan's Wake. Then Mickey Maloney raised his head when another no whiskey flew at him. The distant falling on the bed, the liquor scattered over tip. Young Levitt, see how he rises, Timothy rising from the bed, said, "What'll you whiskey around like blazes? Tannerman Neil, do you think I'm dead?" Whack for the man out and see about there with the lawyer Trummer's shake. Wasn't it the truth I told you? Lots of fun at Finnegan's Wake.
This is the resurrection. I mean, Tim Finnegan is very clearly for Joyce a Christ figure. And here is then the first evocation of Tim Finnegan, the fall, then the Viconian thunder, of a once Wall Street old par, which is just an old person, is retailed early in bed and later on life down through all Christian minstrelsy. The great fall of the off-wall entailed at such short notice the shoot of Finnegan. Now this word P-F-T-J-S-C-H-U-T-E, shoot, is Norwegian, I'm informed, and it refers to the act of falling, and the act of falling from a hill. Finnegan, earth's solid man, that the Humpty Hill head of himself promptly sends an unquiring one well to the west in quest of his tumpty-tum-toes, and their upturned pike point and place is at the knockout in the park, where oranges have been laid to rust upon the green since Devlin's first loved Livy. This is fairly transparent if you're Irish or a citizen of Dublin, because what it's talking about is Dublin is imagined to be situated basically in the belly of an enormous giant person who is Finnegan. Finnegan lies like a giant reclining figure along the Liffey there, husband and wife, river and mountain. And this is actually then, the focus has changed, and now we're talking about the geography. He was a solid man, Earth's solid man, but then somehow he turned into something where the Humpty Hill head of himself promptly sends an unquiring one well to the west in quest of his tumty-tum-toes. And if you have a map of Dublin laid out, you can actually see this enormous man in the landscape. And there are many enormous men and women in the landscape of this planet. And Joyce maps the Dublin geography over all of them. Some of you may know Iztaccíhuatl, the magical mountain in Mexico. Iztaccíhuatl means the sleeping woman in Toltec. And many mountains are imagined to be sleeping people. So here he introduces this theme, and this is one paragraph. This is the invocation of Finnegan as hod carrier. Big Mr. Finnegan of the stuttering hand, freeman's mower, lived in the broadest way imaginable in his rush-lit too far back for messages before Joshuan judges had given us numbers or Helveticus commuted Deuteronomy. One yeasty day he sternly strooks his teat in a tub for to wash the future of his fates. But ere he swiftly took it out again, by the might of Moses, the very water was evaporated, and all the Gunnesses had met their exodus. So that ought to show you what a pension junchy chap he was. And during mighty odd years, this man of hod cement and edifices, HCE, hod cement and edifices, in Toppersthorpe piled bildung supra bildung upon the banks of the rivers by the so-and-so. He iade idle fife Annie, ogged the little creature, with her harring hounds took up your part in her, off while Babulus, mirror ahead, with goodly trowel in grasp and ivory-old overalls which he had particularly fancied, like Harum Childeric Egerberth, he would calculate by multiplicables the altitude and multitude, until he seesaw by neat light of the liquor where twin was born, his round-head stable of other days, to rise in undress masonry upstanded, joy granite, a wallworth of a skier scrape of most Eiffel howeth and towerly, originating from next to nothing, and celescating the hymnals and all, higher architect typoflopical, with a burning bush a bob off its bubble top, and with Lawrence O'Tooler's clittering up and Thomas a Bucket's clattering down. Now, what this paragraph says is he was a great builder. And I think if you think back through your impression of hearing it read, you knew that. You know, these words that are associated, words like a wall worth of a skyer scrape of most Eiffel howeth and towerly. These are skyscraper words. Woolworth, skyscrape, in towerly, howeth, so forth and so on. And he can do this. He can build up a pastiche of surfaces, of impressions. Now, you might say, why is there no economy? Well, there's no economy because economy is an aesthetic criterion for shoemakers, not for artists. And, you know, economy is the curse of the Bauhaus babblers from hell, which Joyce was very concerned to refute all of that. If you have to place this in a context, it's in the context of the most hallucinatory of the Baroque. You know, this is Arcamboldo land. This is a work that would have been welcome at the Rudolphine court in Prague. It's a work of magical complexity and enfolded self-reference. Now, we've just been through these first 4 paragraphs. Now I'll read you what Joseph Campbell has to say on it. By no means all of what he has to say on it. The first 4 paragraphs are the suspended tick of time between a cycle just past and one about to begin. They are in effect an overture, resonant with all the themes of Finnegan's Wake. The dominant motif is the polylingual thunderclap of paragraph 3, Baba Baba Daru, that one, which the voice of God makes audible through the noise of Finnegan's fall. Narrative movement begins with the life, fall, and wake of Hod Carrier Finnegan, pages 4 to 7. The wake scene fades into the landscape of Dublin and environs. We've just heard how he fell from the ladder. Now we move into a description of the wake, and there's a certain voice that appears at certain times. It's where there are a lot of words ending in A-T-I-O-N, continuation of the celebration until the examination of the extermination. These are the 12 judges. Each character, when they appear, has a certain tempo to their character. So when that tempo enters the text, you know the character is present, even though there may be no trace. For example, Anna Livia Pluribel's tempo is the tempo of the hen. Here a little, there a little, go a little, see a little, do a little. The hen is scratching. This is this nervous, bird-like. That's Anna Livia's signature. Here's just one paragraph from the wake scene, which builds and has quite a minor amount of humor associated with it. She's, I should say, Maccool, or a why did you day of a trying Thursday morning, sobs they sided at Finnegan's Chrysamoris wake, all the hooligans of the nation prostrated in their consternation, and their duodismally pluflusive plethora of ululation. There was plums and groans and cherubs and citherers and raiders and cinnamon too, and they all joined in with the shoutmost joviality, Agog and Magog, and the round of them agrog, to the continuation of that celebration until Hand and Hungan's extermination. Some in kink and chorus, more can keenan, belling him up and filling him down. He's stiff, but he's steady as Priamolum. 'Twas he was a decent, gay, labouring youth, sharpen his pillow scone, tap up his beer. Where in this world will you hear such a din again, with their deep brow fundigs and the dusty fidelios? They laid him drawn a lang last bed, with a buckalips of whiskey for his feet and a barrowload of Guinness o'er his head, till the total of the fluid hang the twaddle of the fuddle to. Well, it's a drunken Irish wake, that seems clear, but there are a lot of things going on. Where in this
All right, so
such a din again?
That drops in the cloud. At least the
all
first
this,
layer of it.
All this
Floating there.
Dionysian
Nice happy cloud above the zinnia.
sexual imagery is
And then I'm going to drop in the stem real quick since we still have quite a bit of time left on this clip.
As a character, or more lovable,
And that will serve
is Anna Livia Pluribel. I mean,
to set up the
Anna
next
Livia
step.
Pluribel is
After I get the stem dropped in,
on acid.
there will be a figure behind it. A woman cut in half by the stem, half black, half glowing white. And then where the cubs will be playing, I'm not quite certain. She will either be holding a goat skull or there'll be a goat skull here. I'm not sure about that yet. I'm kind of playing with some astrological themes in this one as well. So, but stem dropping shouldn't take too long. I just got some new paint in. Payne's Gray, including a beautiful bright light green that I'm about to break in with this. Here we go. A minute to mix it up.
Grandpapa's is fallen down, but Grinny spreads the board, meaning Anna Livia is always there. She's always there. And in the wake, really, you could almost say that Molly Bloom's soliloquy has been expanded to 300, 400 pages. And the whole thing is a meditation on the river. The river is the feminine, and the first image in the book and the last image are the image of the river. The river dissolves everything and carries it out to sea. Let me read this description of Anna Olivia Pluribel, and then we'll go back to the synopsis. How beautiful and how true to wife of her, when strangely forbidden to steal our historic presence from the past post-propophoticals, so as to will make us all lordy heirs and lady maidennesses of a pretty nice kettle of fruit. She is living in our midst of debt and laughing through all floors for us. Her birth is uncontrollable, with a naparon for her mask and her sabots kicking arias, so ser, so solly. If yous ask me and I sack you, how, Greeks may rise and Troysters fall, she is mercenary. Through the length of the land lies under liquidation, float, and there's nor a harbow nor an eyebrush on this glabrous place of herschrift. What our Walter shall loan a Vesta and hire some peat and sarch the shores her cockles to heat, and she'll do all a tough woman can to puff the business on, puff, to puff the blaziness on, puff, puff, and even if Humphrey shall fall frumpty times as awkward again in the beard's busaloom of all our grand remonstrances, there'll be eggs for the breakers come to mourn him, sunny side up with care. So true it is that there's where's a turnover, the tay is wet too, and when you think you catch sight of a hind, make sure you're cocked by a hen. Well, Nora felt that Jimmy would have been much better as a singer. She so stated that she had great hopes for his voice, and she was a very practical woman, Nora Barnacle. There wasn't a literary bone in her body, I think. I think that's what Joyce loved about her, was that she was the real thing. And all these women, Molly and Olivia, they all are Nora Joyce for sure. He died shortly after it was published, although it had been known in manuscript for over 10 years to the literati of his circle. It was called Work in Progress. And people didn't even know if he was serious or not. And it was very hard to find a publisher. It was a typographical nightmare. Joyce was going blind. And so, trying to keep track of the spelling, and there's hardly a standard spelling in there. There's hardly a word that is not somehow fiddled with and changed around. If you pay attention to what you're calling life as it is, you will discover that it's not a simple thing at all. That it's like this. I mean, I used to say, when you're vacuuming your apartment, Rome falls 9 times an hour. And your job is to notice. And you always do notice, but you never tell yourself that you're noticing. So in the course of a day, I live, and you live, to some degree, the entirety
Alright, so that is the stem set. Now we're going to have a little fun.
I mean, Rome falls,
Get the compass out.
Algebra's
Throw
discovered,
a sun on the left and a moon on the right.
beating at the gates of Vienna, and it isn't even 11 a.m. yet, So there is this sense of the cold presence of history. We're imprisoned inside the linear assumption that I'm a person in a place, in a time, I'm alive, most people aren't. But in fact, when you deconstruct all that, that is fiction. And the truth is more this onrushing magma of literary association, and in Ulysses you get an enormous amount of half-baked science. Leopold Bloom is always looking at things and explaining to himself how they work using very crackpotted notions of hydraulics and electricity and this sort of thing. I think, people say the psychedelic experience is hard to remember, dreams are hard to remember, but harder to remember than either of those is simply ordinary experience. You lie in the bath and you close your eyes for 30 seconds and empires fall, dynastic families unfold themselves, power changes hands, princes are beheaded, a pope disgraced. Oh, that was for you. And and then somebody drops something and you wake up and 15 seconds have passed. That's the reality of life, but we suppress this chaotic, irrational side. The genius of Joyce and, to some degree, although in a more controlled form, Proust, and then there were other practitioners, Faulkner certainly, was what they called stream of consciousness. But what it was an ability to really listen to the associating mind without trimming, pruning, judging, denying. One of the great puzzles to me is the great antagonism between Jung and Joyce, because you would have thought that they would have been comrades in arms, but Joyce loathed psychoanalysis. He thought that to use all this material to elucidate imagined pathologies was a very uncreative use of it, and that it should all be fabricated into literature. It's very hard to surpass. Thomas Pynchon, William Gaddis, these people, everybody genuflects to Joyce, but very few people plow in the way he did. I mean, Thomas Pynchon is considered a difficult, hallucinatory writer, and there isn't 20 pages in Gravity's Rainbow as obscure as a randomly chosen page here. I can understand the impulse to want to get the universe into a book, because it hints at something that we've talked about in some of these circles, or whatever they are, which is that the character of life is like a work of literature. We are told that you're supposed to fit your experience into the model which science gives you, which is probabilistic, statistical, predictable, and yet it's the felt datum of experience is much more literary than that. I mean, we fall in love, we make and lose fortunes, we inherit houses in Scotland, we lose everything, we get terrible diseases, we're cured of them, or we die of them. But it all has this strong Drang aspect to it, which physics is not supposed to have, but which literature always has. And I think that, I don't know if it's true, but I think what Joyce believed, and what I'm willing to entertain at some depth, is the idea that salvation is somehow an act of encompassing comprehension. That salvation is an actual act of apprehension, of understanding, and that this act of apprehension involves everything. This is why the alchemic, before James Joyce and this kind of literature, the only place where you got these kinds of constructs was in alchemy and magic. The idea that, through an act of magic, the universe could be condensed to yield a fractal microcosm of itself. Well, then what Joyce is saying is that the novel, which was unknown in the alchemical era, the novel comes later, I mean, arguably, but the real zest for the novel comes in the 19th century, that the novel is the alchemical retort into which these theories of how things work can be cast. I think the great modern exponent of this, although now dead, and certainly one who owed an enormous debt to Joyce, was Vladimir Nabokov, especially in Ada. Ada is his paean of praise to Finnegan's Wake, basically, and the idea tacked in there is the idea of causality and ordinary casuistry. See, what all these people are saying, I think, and what the psychedelic experience argues for is as well, is that we are somehow prisoners of language, and that somehow, if we're prisoners of language, then the key which will set us loose is somehow also made of language. What else could fit the lock? So somehow an act of poetic legerdemain is necessary. And Joyce, in Finnegan's Wake, he didn't live to argue the case or to work it out. He died shortly after. But this comes about as close as anybody ever came to actually pushing the entire contents of the universe down into about 14 cubic inches. Joyce and Proust had one meeting, and supposedly Joyce said to Proust, "I'm too young for you to teach me anything." Are you all familiar with the Remembrance of Things Past? Well, it could hardly be a more different work of literature. It is stately and cinematic, and you always know where you are, and the characters are defined. It's an old-style novel, but there are places in it where he just takes flight and prefigures the kind of writing that Faulkner and Joyce were able to do. As far as psychedelic influences, I don't know that there are arguably any. Joyce lived in Trieste for a while and taught English. He may have been